Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Good Germs Off-Road Adventures, and welcome back to the shop. Today, we're going to take a look at probably one of the most unusual little four-wheel drive quads, ATVs, four-wheelers, whatever. One of the most unusual little four-wheel drive quads that Polaris has ever made. We're going to be looking at the Chicken Hawk Polaris Hawkeye. But first, we got to find it. It's somewhere in the back there, and we got to dig it out. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You know, it's back here somewhere. It's been hiding back there for a while. Yep. And here he is. But, you know, he's been sitting in that back corner, going on about 10 months now. Yeah. So we're going to take it outside and kind of blow some of the dust off this before we get into it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get this thing cleaned up a little bit. All right, well, that cleaned up quite nice. Let's go ahead and push him back in the garage so we can have a better look at it. Yep. And there we go. All clean and ready for a review. So what is a Polaris Hawkeye? Without getting too technical, this is a Polaris Hawkeye. So think of the Polaris Hawkeye as the Sportsman's younger brother or sister, whichever way you prefer it. The Hawkeye does share quite a few features with the Sportsman. First is the four-wheel drive system. It's pretty much the same as you get on the Sportsman, the on-demand four-wheel drive system. With the switch, you can turn it off, and it works just as well on this machine as it does, you know, on a Sportsman. You get the same kind of storage rack up here in the front, which won't open because it's hitting the handlebars, but you get what I'm saying. You get, what else? Oh, independent rear suspension. You know, this is a pretty small quad. It's not even 4 feet wide. It's significantly lighter than a full-size Sportsman at about 520 pounds dry weight. So to have independent rear suspension on a unit like this it's pretty neat. It rides decent for a unit for a quad that its size compared to some of the other comparables, like I guess the closest thing to this size wise is probably the Honda, I don't even know what it's called, Rancher. I think the little Honda Rancher 300 and something cc's, but solid rear axle, no four-wheel drive. Kawasaki has another unit, I forget what it's called, also not four-wheel drive. I think it's about 300 or so cc's. Suzuki has their Ozark 250, a little bit smaller engine, no independent rear suspension, and no four-wheel drive. So really, the Hawkeye was kind of in a class all to its own with its size and having four-wheel drive and independent rear suspension. Nobody else did that. So I guess we'll just start off now. We'll walk around the unit and take a look at it. So we'll just start at the front of the machine here, and we'll just start at the bottom. And you can see the front suspension design. It's kind of borrowed from the Sportsman's, but instead of the big cast piece on the struts right here, you can see it's more of a steel piece, but these have been pretty sturdy. I know there was a recall for the very first few 2006 models for the hub carrier, but this was made later in the year, so the recall didn't apply, thankfully. You can see they were nice enough to give us some A-arm guards, and we don't have any torn boots yet. Never replaced the boots on this. You can see in the back there, nestled in the frame, you can see the front drive unit. It's pretty similar to the bigger Sportsman models. I'm not sure if it's as robust, but we've never had an issue with this four-wheel drive system. And you can see the hydraulic lines and disc brake calipers down inside there. Coming up, you can see the nice big bumper that we've added to this. And actually, we only added this bumper about a year and a half ago. I was able to find it on the eBay website and a pretty good price and got it shipped to me. It was brand new, a little bit scuffed up. Some of that was from when I bought it, but some of it may or may not have, been from the trail. You can see the Harbor Freight road shock light we've attached there. But the headlights you can also see. Now, these headlights don't have a high and a low beam. It's just literally on and off. This one is angled a little bit more up. That one is angled a little bit more at the ground. So you kind of get your high and low beam all in one. It's one of the more strange designs I've ever seen. And then on up to your front rack storage box. And since we're up here, we'll go ahead and open it. But before we do that, we went ahead and added a little place to plug in our battery tender. I like to keep my batteries charged up so that way they don't go flat when they sit. Especially with this unit, it sits quite a bit. Opening up the front storage, just like you would see on most Sportsman models. You've got your storage. It's a little smaller, but for, honestly, a quad this small, it's not bad. We've got a few tools in here, some bungee cords. And the bungee cords are to hold the rack down if this thing's ever on an open trailer, because for some reason it likes to just come loose. The little dials there will come loose, and this will start flapping in the wind. So the bungee cords would hold it down while it's on a trailer. And of course your battery right here at the top where it's easily serviceable. Of course, I believe I covered this when we looked at Ruby. We added the Moose little fender bag here. Love these things. Here you can get a good look at the footwells. They're a little bit different design, more open and a little bit more aggressive. I kind of like them. Up top, your typical Polaris stuff, the brake, your normal switch pod, except like I mentioned, the headlights, there's no high beam or low beam. You just have on and off. You've got your choke, the switches for the road shock lights that we added, of course your key switch, and the thumb throttle, and the all-wheel drive selector switch, which is on for some reason. I have no idea why that's on. All right. Coming around, let's check out the rear of the unit here. You've got a nice big sticker that says Polaris on the back. Okay. And here you can get a look at the rear suspension. Good amount of ground clearance with these independent suspension units. A decent ride. That sway bar you see right there, and it attaches over there. The sway bar is actually quite stiff. It doesn't allow for a lot of sway, but I'll be honest, with this machine, it's actually pretty good because it's so narrow and still almost as tall as a regular Sportsman, it would probably it would want to fall over in a turn. You do get a hitch mount, just like everything else, little 1 1/4 hitch. That's pretty good. Adjustable rear shocks, just like you normally see, and these are set to the all the way soft mode because I believe these shocks are shared with the Sportsman, and this quad just doesn't weigh as much. You get your little brake light. We've got a added grab bar here. This was, this is a Polaris part, but it was an add-on that I found on eBay, super cheap, like $20, and I went ahead and bolted that on. And then coming around, to the right side, you've got some pretty good scratches there. And you've got a seat right there. And you have your gear selector. And this gear selector only has high, neutral, reverse. You've got no low range and no park. The park would have been nice. Low range would have really been nice. So let's talk about the tires. This is a pretty good angle. You can see these tires are actually really nice. These are from the Amazon website. And there's a very specific reason why they came from the Amazon website. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But first, check out the rim. Look how brand new that rim is. Yeah, I know. It's pretty banged up. So what Polaris did with the Hawkeye here, they used the 12-inch rim, the same size rim that you would see on a full-size Sportsman. That way it could clear the disc brake rotors in the front and the one in the rear. However, with the size of the machine here, which again, it's not a very big machine, with the size of the machine here, they opted to put 22-inch tall tires on a 12-inch rim. Well, that doesn't leave a lot of rubber. And also the front rim is quite a bit wider than the front tire is. So it just, got the snot beat out of it riding out in the desert with all the rocks. Polaris did have a limited edition or a special edition of this model of some sort where they did offer 23-inch tires. But with this little engine and this transmission that they've come up with for this, I can't imagine that would have been fun to ride. I mean, at 22-inch tires, it doesn't have much in the way of power. I couldn't imagine if you put taller tires on it, how much slower it would probably be. So the original tires that came with this machine were a Maxxis, again, 22-inch tires, with a really poor tread design that did not have a lot of actual tread on it. They lasted a long time, and some of that is because this rig really doesn't make enough power to spin the wheels a whole lot. I mean, the four-wheel drive is great when you're climbing hills, but that's really the only time you need it is when you're going up a really steep hill. But eventually we did swap out those tires, and we opted to put these on from the Amazon website. The biggest reason for that is because try to go onto the internet and try to find 22-inch tires that would fit on a 12-inch rim. You're not going to find a full set. You might find some fronts, but you're not going to find the rears. At least I couldn't find them. But on the Amazon, they had this brand, the Sunf SUNF brand. And they've been pretty good. They're reasonably priced. I think the whole set cost barely over $200, which is super cheap for tires. The tread design is really aggressive. It actually is they're quite good. Did have a quality issue. I believe it was this one. I ended up taking these to a tire shop to have them mounted, and immediately this one was leaking air. And you would think it would be from that pretty good bend in the rim, but it actually wasn't. There was a hole in the tire. So they went ahead and they were nice, and they patched it for free. Nice local shop. So they patched the tire, and they've been fine since. Now, these tires have only been on it for, I don't know, a year and a half. I think it's only got a few weekends of riding on them, so they're still pretty new, as you can tell. Let's go ahead and get into some of the finer nitty-gritty details of the machine, and we'll just start with what's under the seat here. So just like we saw in Ruby Sue, taking the seat off is pretty easy. Just grab that, and up it goes. And there's just not a lot to see here. There's a lot of dust. That's to be expected. You've got your air filter down here, and just like in Ruby Sue and both of the 570s, we do have a uni filter in the box here. I do have a little strap here, and I don't know why, but there's a strap. It's a little place you could keep a thing or two. And that's about it. The carburetor's buried up under the gas tank. Almost impossible to get to. Honestly, you have to take the entire rear fender off to get that carburetor out. And that's about it. Not a lot to see under here. Let's just put the seat back on and just move on. You can see here we have our backup pull starter right there. And this was something you could see on pretty much all of the older Polarises. Polaris, whatever the plural of Polarises is. And then, of course, looking down here, you have your foot brake pedal, which again, just like any other Polaris, this only operates the rear brake. So here you can get a decent view of the air-cooled cylinder. But something else Polaris did to try to keep this cool is they also put an oil. They put an, whoops, that was my hand. They put an oil cooler here, right at the base where the oil filter goes. So this oil cooler, I'm only assuming, does a pretty good job at help keeping the thing cool. So I mentioned the clutch design on these machines being a little different from the full-size Sportsmans, and right away you can see you've got this big aluminum clutch cover instead of the plastic one. So the clutches in the bigger Sportsman models, if you've seen them before, I'll make a picture maybe right here and you can see what I'm talking about. But those had the big cage and the springs and all those things. These are a little different. These have a series of 8 weighted rollers around the outside, and the physics and the magic that push those out is what changes your gear ratio on this, as opposed to that big heavy spring. So much different design, which a lot of people don't like because they don't understand that when they hear something that sounds like an engine rod knock, it's actually that clutch. This thing's been knocking for going on 10, 12 years. Look, it runs fine. It's been running fine. It's just this clutch. The phone made a text message over there. So as much as we have enjoyed having the chicken hawk in the family, it's not been without its problems. To get into that, we're going to have to get it up in the air, get a couple of wheels off, and we can show you what I'm on about. So we're going to start on the left side of the machine just to show you a better view of, the sway bar here. And what's strange is the spring sometimes rubs on the shock casing. Don't really know why. And they mounted the lower sway bar in link to the lower shock mount. That's okay. The upper A-arm, this is just a single piece of stamped steel, which overall doesn't really look all that tough, but they've never bent or broken, so they're okay. The brake is also on this left side instead of the right side. And again, single disc, and it works just fine. Getting up to the front mount of the lower A-arm may be kind of hard to see, but you've got basically 2 plates of steel here that hold the A-arm in place. Now originally it only had one, and the lower A-arm mount where it attaches to the frame actually ripped off of the frame here at the bottom. Polaris must have known that this was a bit of a design flaw and a defect, because for 2007 this lower subframe piece came with 2 layers of steel here for the A-arm to attach to. And so that's what we did. We replaced it with a 2007 model lower subframe. Yeah, this completely just ripped itself right off of the subframe. Now coming directly to the back, you have this other piece of stamped steel frame member, and it seems fine, but if we get in close, you'll see a bit of a weld right about there. That had also completely cracked and came apart. Just welded it back, and it's been fine since. At some point, I'm probably going to try to replace that while the parts are still available. Now, onto the right side of the unit, you can actually see how small this transmission is compared to some of the bigger Sportsman models. But notice how much shinier this hub is compared to the other side. And that's because the original one had cracked right across here, and I didn't even notice it until we put the new tires on about 1.5 years ago. Unbolted it, and the hub came off in 2 pieces. So had to replace that. This is a factory Polaris part. Looks like they redesigned it. You can see it's got these extra, I don't know, ribs here. If we go back to the other side, you don't see that. See, on this side, the design's a little different. And they do use the same part for both sides. It's not a different side for right and left. You can see how here it mounts to the disc brake rotor. And I'm assuming that because this one is bolted to the disc brake rotor is probably the only reason why this one didn't crack. And again, on the newer one that was replaced, you can see the same disc brake mounting. Like I said, the same part is used on either side. It doesn't make a difference what side it is. One more issue that we had is the linkage for the gear shifter where it connects here. It's a plastic clip and that had broken, so that had to be replaced as well. Up here in the front, no issues to report. The front end's been perfectly fine, but you can see these huge air ducts they have right here because, like I mentioned earlier, this unit is air-cooled instead of water-cooled. So you don't have an overheating problem. You don't have a water pump seal that's going to go bad on you. So that's kind of neat. Now on to the question that inevitably somebody's going to ask, how fast does he go? Look, it's just a little 300. It's a little over 500 pounds. It has a very inefficient drive system that we're all used to with Polaris, and I believe this one's even more inefficient than some of the full-size Sportsman models. It's not fast. It tops out usually at about 40 to 41 miles per hour. I have seen 45 on a lake bed, possibly with a tailwind, but that's about it. It's not a speed demon. It's not meant to be. So now that we've had a pretty good walk around of the machine, let's see if we can get the old dude to fire up. I am expecting a bit of a fight because, well, it's been in the corner and not started for about 10 months now. Okay, well, first we're gonna reach way up in here and turn the fuel on, if I can find it. Oh, wait, there it is, way back up in here. There we go. Okay, fuel's turned on. And turn the key on. And then I guess the only thing we really have left to do is pull the choke and a couple of pumps. That was a little sticky, so I'm a little worried that we might have a little bit of gummy. Well, let's smell the gas. Let's see how this smells. Well, the good news is it does smell like gasoline instead of, you know, something else. Let's go ahead and see if the old dude will fire up after 10 months of sitting in the corner. Wow, and there he goes. So he's idling with the choke on, and then now you can probably hear that clutch knocking. Yeah, I guess we should have checked the oil before doing this. Okay. So I'm just holding it just off idle till it warms up a little bit, and then we'll see if he'll calm down on idle for us. And I don't know if you can hear it. That little knocking in there, that is the sound of the clutch. And there we go. 10 months sitting, and this old dude just never, ever quits. This little machine just never ceases to impress me. All right, turn them off. Just heard the clunk. Again, those rollers, they make some noise. Start them up again. Like it was just rode yesterday. And I'm not telling any fibs here. This literally hasn't been started since October of last year, which is the last time it actually went out riding. So this little machine is just simply amazing. You know, with all of the other full-size Sportsmans that we have, you know, we've got the two 570s. We had the 500 that we sold about a year ago, and a Ruby Sue. You know, people would ask, well, what would possess me to buy something like this? Well, at the time, I actually didn't have any Polaris Sportsmans. I was racing, and so I had my Suzuki LTR 450. I had an LTZ 400. That was kind of the sport practice and other sporty quad. But I was racing on the LTR. And at the end of 2007, I had decided that I wanted to pick up a quad for my dad, who was getting up on age even back then, and his health was starting to decline at the time, and he always wanted to go out riding. Um, my mom had purchased the 500 that you saw in the other video. She had purchased that and thinking they could both just ride, doubles on that, which, you really can't. Um, so I found this at the local motorcycle ATV store, and it was the end of 2007. It was in November, December, but this was a 2006. They had a bunch of them, and they were clearing them out. I think I ended up paying like $3,000 for this thing brand new, which was really cheap. It was on sale. I think they're normally supposed to be about 4,000 at the time, but I paid 3,000 for this thing new, and I just thought it would be perfect for him. He could get on and off of it pretty easy because it's not as big as the big 500 was, and it's four-wheel drive. It can go anywhere. It's got the independent suspension, so it has a nice ride to it. Importantly, you didn't have to shift gears in it, which, my dad used to race sports cars and he used to drag race. And for him, he always preferred a manual transmission in his cars. But as his health was declining, shifting gears, he just wasn't really mentally capable of managing that anymore. So it was nice to have the automatic, just put it in forward and go. It's not fast. It wasn't going to throw him off. And I did actually have a backrest that would attach to the rear rack on it, and I still have the backrest, but I had put that on there for him, so give him a little bit extra support on the back. And he rode it for a few years until he was just physically unable to. And then the thing sat for years, and then I moved out of state. When I came back, started getting back heavy into the riding, no longer racing, and pulled this thing out of the shed and got it running again, and have abused it ever since. But anyway, like I said, I had picked this up from my dad, whose health had already started to slip back in the 2006, 2007 time frame. And it was just at the time the perfect machine for him. Now you can tell by some of the things that we've seen, the scratches, the immaculately still brand new wheels. Yeah, no, they're pretty banged up. The underside skid plates are banged up pretty good. We've ridden the crap out of this machine. And let me tell you something. It may be small and it may be underpowered, but it has done everything and gone everywhere that the big full-size sportsmans have gone without any troubles. It's never really gotten stuck. We've never had to tow it out. It just goes. And I know it doesn't have a low range, but it has, I don't know, it's got some witchcraft in the transmission. I don't know what it does, but it goes into a mode that we call hawk mode. If you're going up a really steep hill and it just slows down and you think it's going to stop, you think it's just going to stop in its tracks and not climb the hill anymore. Well, if you just leave your thumb in the throttle, it acts like it just finds another gear. And this is why we call it hawk mode. It just starts chugging up the hill and it just won't stop, and it will clear any hill that any of the other bigger machines have done. I can't explain it, but it's an awkward machine for somebody my size to ride, so I never ride the thing except for to make sure that it's still working okay. But these days, my daughter, she rides it. My son, he rides it. My stepdaughter, she rides it. Everybody likes to ride this machine. Everybody that rides it likes it. And it's just pretty amazing to me that this machine can do everything that it does, and it just doesn't quit. And you just heard it run, after 10 months of sitting, it fired right up and idled pretty quickly. Look, this thing just doesn't quit. If there's any machine out there that can have the personality and the soul of something that doesn't ever give up, it's the chicken hawk here. I'm a firm believer that a car, a motor vehicle, unless it has a soul and a personality, is a pointless machine. And this thing has the most soul and heart out of any machine I've ever had. And I think some of the attachment was that it was my dad's. I apologize for getting emotional there. We lost Dad about a year and a half ago, and Every now and then, I think he makes his presence known. Yeah. Well, I think that's going to do it today. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you wouldn't mind, go do the whole like, subscribe, share, comment thing. It really helps. In the meantime, ride safe. We'll see you later.